At my college, all biologists their freshman year we're on a semester system. So first semester, you took basically ecology and evolution. Second semester, you took cellular and molecular biology. Your second year, you began to specialize. So it was first semester, second year. I bumped into one of my friends from the first year, and she said, "Oh, what biology are you taking?" Because she knows biology major. I said, "Oh, I'm taking plant physiology." And she said, "Why?" I said, "I looked interesting. I don't know." By studying plants, I personally was able to get a deeper understanding and appreciation for biology, because you cannot anthropomorphize plants all that easily. You could anthropomorphize all different types of animals very easily, vertebrates especially, right? We talk about the feelings of fish or cats or dogs and that kind of stuff. Even worms we talk about in terms of like how they feel or what they're experiencing, Plants, good luck. But we still know that they carry on all of the characteristics of any living organism and are the product of evolution. So if you're interested hardcore in biology, plants are great teachers. Okay? As are fungi, by the way. Fungi are really a trip. I mean, plants we're familiar with because we're around them a lot. Fungi, dude. We're not going to have time to really go deep into fungi, unfortunately. Hopefully I'll be able to touch on them a little bit. They are really bizarre. Like, nutty. Okay. So this is just a general introduction to plants. Plants are very diverse. Now, there are not as many species of plants as there are animals, but that largely has to do with the fact that there are an ass ton of insects. Like, there are massive amounts of insects. And by the way, the reason there are so many insects is because there are so many plants. Very good. Okay. So here's just a few representative plants. Mosses. The moss was a plant. It's a relatively simple plant. Ponderosa pine tree. Very, very tall, big. Some of the largest organisms on the planet are plants. One of the most highly evolved of all plants are orchids, as a matter of fact. I've heard them described as they are like the human brain equivalent in the plant world. Their evolution is very, very interesting. They have a requisite symbiotic relationship with fungi in order for them to germinate, but then they actually parasitize the fungus. In addition to that, their methods of reproduction are fascinating. We'll get more into that when we talk about reproduction later on. All right, so here's the deal with plants. So what makes a plant a plant? Plants, by and large, live on land. There are a few plants that live in the water. Some even live in the ocean. In the same way that marine mammals like whales and seals and sea lions are descendants of land-dwelling animals, there are a few plants that evolved on land and then moved into the water. But the vast majority of plants live on land. Plants are really land-based organisms. Okay? All right. Vast majority of plants are photosynthetic. We're going to talk more about this on Monday. We're going to go into photosynthesis. Did you guys cover photosynthesis in 211?
No.
I'm hearing yes, no, yes, no.
We didn't.
You didn't at all. Okay. We're going to go into the Calvin cycle, the light reactions, the dark reactions, all that stuff on Monday. Most plants are photosynthetic. Simply put, photosynthesis takes sunlight it makes. Very important reaction, very, very important reaction for pretty much all life on the planet. Why is it really important for us? Why is photosynthesis important for us? We eat the sugar and we breathe the oxygen. Yeah. Can you do photosynthesis? No. What do you do instead? Respiration. Can plants do respiration?
Yes.
Absolutely. Plants do both. The reason plants do photosynthesis is in large part so they have something to eat, to respire. Okay? Some plants are not photosynthetic. There are just a few of these. They're actually parasitic plants. One that grows around here called Monotropa. It's lost its chlorophyll for photosynthesis. It's taken on a life of pirating other plants. Arr. All right. Okay. All right. The story of plants really is, it's kind of similar to the evolution of mammals. I like to think of it in the same way because, we're mammals. Whereas as in the animal kingdom, animals began in the ocean and then moved on to land, and then there's this constant adaptation of life away from water, right? Water is fundamental to all life, but we now have lots of things that live away from the ocean, right? You guys covered this in 212, I hope. A little bit. You guys know how life started? Really?
Remind us.
The primordial soup in the oceans, there was either hydrothermal vents or, I do this in Biology 100. Hydrothermal vents or mud flats. Stanley Miller's experiment, you guys don't know this stuff? Oh, shit. All life started in the ocean. That's why inside the cells of all living organisms is roughly the same proportion of ions that you find in the ocean. Which is kind of cool. And the reason that you have that proportion of ions in the ocean is because that's the basic chemical mixture of the planet Earth. So we all carry inside of us the sort of the basic fundamental chemistry of the Earth, which makes sense. We're made of the Earth. We'll return to the Earth one day when we're done. Anyway, so life has sort of been, evolving away from the ocean. Not that there's still life in the ocean, that's also evolving, but, anyway, this is kind of pathway away from water. Plants have gone through the same thing. So they've adapted these different structures and physiologies in order to deal with less and less water, to be farther and farther away from water. The two basic structures in plants that we see this most easily in are the roots and shoots. I have to admit, compared to all the varied body plans of the different phyla of animals, by and large, plant body plans are pretty simple. You got the stuff underground, we call that, and then you have the stuff above ground, we call that bada bing, bada boom, there we go. Okay? Now, they vary in what they do and how they function, and they're used to us. For example, carrots are roots, very tasty roots. Beets are roots, very tasty roots, right? Lettuce is shoots, very tasty shoots. Okay, cool. Roughly about 300,000 living species in 10 different, I don't know why botanists did this because I think they just felt insecure. They called their fundamental classification divisions. In zoology, they're known as phyla. I don't know why they call them divisions, but they call them divisions. I may call them phyla, I may call them divisions. It means the same thing, okay? They are primary producers. What does it mean to be a primary producer? You make stuff. Yeah, you do photosynthesis. Okay. Again, I may use the term producer, I may use the term primary producer. It means the same thing. They're photosynthetic. Okay? Now, we know that plants evolved from photosynthetic protists living in the ocean. In particular, things we call algae. Okay? How do we know this? Because they've got some strong similarities, aka synapomorphies. Didn't think you'd ever hear that word again, did you? They have cellulose in their cell walls. Everybody touch cellulose. Oh, nice, David. You knew what to do. That's awesome. Everybody touch cellulose. No, this is not cellulose. This is keratin. Where's your cellulose? Sherry, where's your cellulose? You're holding it right now. Yeah, what is cellulose? Paper made from wood. Wood, yeah. Wood pulp is a bunch of cellulose, right? Cellulose is super important. You also probably are wearing cellulose. Cotton, right? Cotton is cellulose. Okay, good. And green algae also have chlorophylls A and B. We'll talk about this when we get into photosynthesis. So we think that plants evolved from a charophyte green algae about 425 million years ago. This is probably what it looked like, something like this. This is chara, a stone wort. Wort is an ancient English term meaning herb. Herb. Yep. There's actually a scene in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf says, "Well, fine, we won't." We're getting high. Notice, it's basically a green, really simple plant-like thing, okay? It's got, these are leaf-like, sort of. Basically, it's a structure that captures sunlight so that it can photosynthesize and make sugars and other things. And then it has these little spores here, which are used for reproduction. Okay. Really, really simple plant structure. Okay. As plants moved on land, they developed some cool adaptations. We'll go more in depth into these when we talk about the structure of plants. But some important ones. Most plants produce a waxy cuticle. What's a cuticle? Show me your cuticles. Good. It's a waxy excretion that is used to seal something, right? So your cuticles here basically, they seal your nail from the rest of your finger. In plants have this problem, right? So they need water. It's fundamental. We know this. If you've ever had a plant you had to water it, if you didn't, what happened? It died. We've all killed plants. Those who own them. In order to hold on to the water, they cover themselves with this waxy hydrophobic barrier called the cuticle. It's excreted by the epidermal cells. Now, you don't know anything about plant anatomy, but you know what an epidermal cell is, right? How do you know what an epidermal cell is? Epi means outside, on top of. Dermal is skin. Can you figure out what an epidermal cell is located? There you go. It's on the outside of the plant, right? It excretes the cuticle. That creates this waxy barrier so the plant doesn't lose that much moisture. Question, do you think the cuticle would be thicker or thinner in a desert plant relative to a forest plant? Yes. Thicker, right? Okay, not surprising. Other cool feature, plants have these neat things on the undersides of their leaves called stomata, also sometimes just referred to as stoma. They are used for allowing water to escape the plant. As we'll learn later on, plants take advantage of the evaporative qualities of water to allow water to move all the way through the body of the plant. Doesn't matter how big the plant is. It could be a small little daisy. It could be a giant sequoia tree 300 feet tall. Either way, what's going on is water is traveling up the roots of that plant, into the body of the plant, all the way up to the top, out the leaves, out of the stomata. Stomata are also utilized to take in the other really important thing for photosynthesis. What is the other very important reactant in photosynthesis? Carbon dioxide. Excellent. So plants breathe in carbon dioxide through their stomata in their leaves. Okay. This creates a fundamental paradox for plants, which is if they want CO2, they have to open their stomata, but when they do that, they lose water. So different plants, as we'll see, have dealt with this in different ways, kind of physiologically, the way they handle this. Okay, so The simplest of the plants lack vascular tissue. We're going to talk a little bit about those guys. They're not that interesting. Mosses, basically. Okay. The big evolutionary adaptation that allowed plants to live away from water is vascular tissue. Now you notice mosses, which do not have vascular tissue, are always located where? Gotta be wet, right? This is why there's that old saying that you'll always find moss growing on the north side of a tree. Good. Why would mosses be growing on the north side of a tree? What's that? Because the sun is always in the south, in the northern hemisphere. Very good. Yes, in the northern hemisphere, the sun is always to the south. Did you know that? Yes. It's part of the benefits of being in the northern hemisphere. Okay? All right, so the sun is always to the south of us at midday. Therefore, if there's going to be a shadow on a tree, where is the shadow going to be located, Artur? North, very good. Therefore, the north side of a tree is going to be cooler, it's going to be moister, and that's where what will grow? Moss, very good. Now, whoever said this did not live in the Pacific Northwest. Because you know in the Pacific Northwest, we just don't have sunshine. And everything stays wet all the time, and therefore, where does moss grow? Everywhere. Including, do you know what the old derogatory term for somebody from the Northwest is? A mossback. You heard the term mossback? Next time you travel to visit relatives in California, they might say, hey, mossback, what's up? What they mean is that you have moss growing on you, because here, moss grows everywhere, not just the north side of a tree. Okay? All right. What up, mossbacks? You ever heard the term mossback before? Yeah, it's a good one. There's a local journalist named Knut Berger, and he's known as the mossback. He's a local historian of the Northwest historian. Okay. All right. So the tissue inside of the plant that is used for transporting water comes in two forms. The vascular tissue in the plant is known as, one is called xylem, which carries water, and the other one is called phloem, which carries sap. Xylem and phloem. These are awesome Scrabble words. Xylem itself will get you like 50 points on the right circle. Xylem and phloem. Okay? Xylem is used for transporting water. Phloem transports sugar, aka sap. This time of year, the phloem is starting to flow. Do not park your car underneath any trees, because what will happen? You will get sap on your tree, and that stuff is really annoying and disgusting. Yes, it is like the blood of the plant. In the same way that if you get cut, what happens to the cut? It bleeds. Like, I just bleeded that. Sorry for hemophilia. No, what happens for most of us? You clot, right? It creates a scab. The same thing happens on a tree. It scabs. And what creates the scab? The phloem sap, right? It's full of all these antifungal, antimicrobial agents that seal that cut to make sure nothing gets in and kills the tree. Yeah.
How does that work with maple syrup?
How's it work with maple syrup?
No, like when you go to tap it.
Yeah, you gotta tap it, yeah. Yeah, they're very careful about that. So you should never carve your initials in a tree, because what you're doing is you're basically cutting that tree open and allowing pathogens inside to attack it. But yeah, with maple, what happens with the maple is they store sugar in their roots, and then they pump the sap, they literally pump it up into the leaves in the springtime so that the leaves can grow. What people have learned is you can tap into that and then get some of that sap out. Yep. And I can't remember what it is. I think it's 100 gallons of sap for like 1 pint of maple syrup or something. Yeah. There's not a lot of sugar in it, but They have to evaporate off a lot of it. Yeah. Okay. Root systems of plants. Roots are relatively straightforward. Roots are where plants absorb their water. When you water a plant, do you water its leaves? No. Where do you water? Water the ground, where its roots are. Excellent. Okay. So the roots anchor the plants, they absorb water and other nutrients from the soil. Right? Plants, in addition to carbon dioxide and water, need other things like nitrogen, phosphorus, etc. Peter.
Where do plants get all the phosphorus?
Where do they get it from?
Yeah.
Dead animals. Yep, dead animals and animal. Correct, feces. Number one source globally of phosphorus is guano. What's guano?
Bat poop.
Bird or bat? Yeah, but mostly bird. Yeah, seabird poop. Yep. There are entire islands in the Pacific that have been mined.
I heard that. I heard that
All right.
last.
Two different types of, there are multiple types of roots, but here are some more common ones. Taproot, single root. You find this in drier areas, so it can go deeper and get to the water. Fibrous root, this is found in plants that live in very wet areas, like that lily. Shoots, as I said before, are relatively simple. You've got the main stem coming up and the leaves branching off of there. Shoots are used for photosynthesis and reproduction. So when plants reproduce, they do that in their leaves. I hate to tell you this, I once had somebody dump me because I told her this. After that, she's like, we can't hang out anymore. Flowers are just modified leaves.
What? You told me that?
Yeah, they're just modified leaves. Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Can't look at them.
They're not these like amazing, beautiful. They are amazing and beautiful and special, but they're modified leaves. They are. In the same way, you know what pearls are?
Oysters.
Like an oyster's abscess. Yeah. Okay. Leaves are also where plants do gas exchange, right? That's where oxygen leaves the plant and CO2 is absorbed, which, by the way, is the opposite of what you do. Kind of cool. The basic evolution of the leaf. Who's looking at the bracken ferns today? Bracken ferns are a great example of this. So if you look at the regular sword fern, well, I'll go through this when we discuss these plants more in detail. You have sort of like the basic frond with the little leaflets coming out. What happened with the bracken fern is, and you can totally see how this would happen, you could have a simple mutation that would cause an extra level of branching, right? So instead of having just one straight stem, you have a mutation that causes a branch. And then there are branches of the branches, and branches more and more and more. And then at some point in time, if you get more tissue growing around those branches, you have a leaf. Add some color to that leaf, maybe add a little bit of sugar, add an anther, a stamen, a pistil, you got a flower. Okay. Okay, plant life cycle is frickin' weird. Plants engage in something known as alternation generation. Did you talk about alternation generation in 212? Nope. Yeah, there are a couple animals that do it too. It is absolutely bizarre. So, when you see a mature plant, it is what we call a sporophyte. It is a diploid organism. What does it mean to be diploid? Very good. You got one set of DNA from your mom, and you have one set of DNA from your dad. Are you a diploid organism? Yes, you are. Good. Okay. Sporophytes undergo meiosis. Do you undergo meiosis? Yes. Yes. If you're a female, you undergo meiosis about once a month. If you're a male, you undergo meiosis about 10 million times a day. Okay?
I thought females.
And you do that to produce
So when they
sperm
were first
or
born.
egg or sperm, right? Plants, a little bit different. Plants undergo meiosis
Like he said.
to
that
produce
females are period. I know, but
a spore.
meiosis is like the creation of the egg. I thought the eggs were already.
Spore is haploid. Okay? Just like your sperm or egg. But unlike your sperm or egg, the spores undergo mitosis. They divide and they become multicellular. And they form what we call a gametophyte. Now in some plants, the gametophyte is free living, haploid, one set of DNA. So this would be like you take your sperm or your egg and you just cast it into the environment and it grows up. Yep, it grows up on its own. It goes, goes to school, gets a job. Okay. It then releases gametes. What's another name for gametes? It's a name for gamete. Gametes are. Gametes. Give me one example of a gamete.
Sperm.
Somebody said it. Egg and sperm. Okay, good. So this thing releases sperm or egg. They fertilize, and the sperm fertilizes the egg, producing a zygote, which is diploid. Okay. Okay. It then undergoes mitosis to make up a sporophyte. It's called alternation of generation because one generation is diploid, the next generation is haploid. The next generation is diploid, the next generation is haploid. This would be like your grandparents were diploid, your parents are haploid, you're diploid, your kids are haploid, your grandkids are, you see what I'm saying? It alternates back and forth. Now, the relative size of the diploid versus haploid phase of the life cycle has changed over evolutionary time. In the simple, really simple plants, the algae, the tree plants, they are dominated by the haploid phase of the life cycle. So whenever you see an algae, it's basically haploid. It only produces a few little zygote diploid spores. Mosses are haploid. It is only every once in a while, if you look close at a moss, you'll see this little cat thing come up. That is the diploid phase of the life cycle. But as plants have evolved farther and farther away from the water, they have become much more diploid dominant. We get to ferns. When you see a grown fern, it's diploid. It does have a haploid free-living gametophyte. There are these small little things about this big. You'll find them near ferns. I was showing somebody, I think was it you guys? I was showing on the bottoms of fern fronds, there are these little thing called sori. They release the spores. They drop on the ground. They grow up into these gametes. These things, these things release sperm and egg. That makes babies. Now, as plants have evolved farther away from water, like I said, the diploid phase has grown. In the gymnosperms, including our coniferous plants, like the Pinus contorta, it is the haploid phase only exists in the cones. In flowering plants, the haploid phase has become very small. The female haploid phase never leaves the flower. It's found inside the flower. But the male haploid phase, the male gametophyte of these seed-bearing plants has gotten so small, so tiny, that it can be carried by the wind, it can be picked up on the butts of bees, it can be picked up on the feathers of birds, and yes, my friends, it gets stuck up your nose and gives you hay fever. What is the male gametophyte of a flowering plant?
Pollen.
Pollen, very good. Now, pollen is not sperm. When you have hay fever, it's not that you have plant sperm up your nose. But it is trying to release sperm. It is still trying to fertilize your nasal cavities, thankfully. It can't because you are not a genetic match. That's it for today. I will see you all on Monday. Before you leave, I have one request. Over the weekend, if you would please thank a plant for being a plant. We all could use more plants in our lives.